On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very special treat. He's a screenwriter, director, producer. Most people know him for creating arguably the most fun, entertaining, and brilliant TV show of all time, HBO's Entourage. He's a great human being, a fellow New Yorker, and just an overall juggernaut in life. He is Doug Ellin. How you doing, Doug?
I'm doing good. I'd like this pandemic to be over, but I'm doing good.
Yeah, likewise. And it's such an honor to be here today with you. I'm a huge lifelong fan of yours. Not only the show Entourage, which will be a significant situation and just an overall such an inspiring piece of art for me for the rest of my life, but ultimately you, the man, and your journey. And I'm just so impressed, and I love your story. You know, it wasn't always easy, overcoming obstacles and challenges to eventually the Entourage situation. So I can't wait to dive deep. I'll tell you this, you have my word. We'll make this different than all the podcasts that you usually do. We will manufacture magic here today.
All right, cool. I look forward to it.
Yeah. So we're going to get a little weird right from the beginning. I'm going to ask you something, and then we'll jump backward to start at the beginning. What's your superpower, Doug?
Oh, I always thought you were talking kryptonite. Superpowers. It's a tough question because I'm a self-deprecating neurotic Jew from Long Island. So superpowers. When I think I obviously have a very good. I'm an observationalist, and I am very good at observing people, and I quickly understand how different people talk, which is why when I write dialogue, it hopefully seems to be natural, but that's probably my greatest skill. Unfortunately, my kryptonite is I don't like writing. So, I'm hoping that my superpower is this, because I just, I started doing I'm fucking Billboard over here, but I started doing my podcast, and, I started out as a stand-up comic, and I didn't like the lifestyle. I'm a homebody. I'm not really a guy who likes to be in a club at 2:00 in the morning with a bunch of dudes throwing jokes out. I've kind of found my voice doing this podcast. So I'm hoping that is my thing. It's been going very well, and I actually like it, which, I think one of the best things people can teach you early on is find something that you love. It's a line from Flamingo Kid, which has probably been stolen 1,000 times and probably came from something before it, but it was, if you find what you love and what you're good at, and it's the same thing, you're in a good place. Now, the thing I always loved was sports. I wasn't good enough to do anything that was going to make any money in sports. So I've found my second passion. So at this point, this is it, to be honest with you.
I love that. And everything that you just said hits home to me. You're speaking my language, my friend, because as we were speaking together before we went on air, I pivoted in the pandemic and went all in. I was finally able to identify my passion, my purpose, which is to help people and help them see a different perspective and revamp their mindset. But for so long, I was doing stuff that didn't fulfill me, even though lucrative. So you speak my language, and you're absolutely right. For the audience listening, that's so valuable. Life is too short. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's very unpredictable. Find what you absolutely love and make it your life. And pretty confident once you identify that, you'll be able to monetize it, make it work.
Hopefully. I mean, I never like to tell anybody they are, because like I said, I was very passionate about sports, and I had a lot of friends who were better athletes than me that were more passionate, and thought it might lead to something, which it never was going to. So I think it's the balance. And some people are lucky enough to find that perfect mesh, but I never like to tell people that, oh, if you love writing, you're going to make it as a writer, because it's not an easy road, and you have to have some talent, which, I think a lot of people watch a lot in Hollywood and go, oh, Jesus, look at all the crap they make. But the truth is, even the bad stuff that gets made is usually made with a lot of talented people and a lot of hard work,
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Agree with everything. So going back to the beginning now for a moment, as Doug and I identified before the show started, we both grew up in the same town around the block from each other, which is Merrick, New York, which is pretty cool. So you were born in Brooklyn, and then you pretty much raised and grew up in Long Island before heading to New Orleans for college, right?
Yeah, I never lived in Brooklyn. I was just born there. My brothers were there for a few years, and obviously my parents are both from there, but I grew up in Merrick from day one.
That's great. So Something that stuck out to me a lot about you, because like I said, I was doing my homework because that breeds confidence, and I respect the hell out of you, dog, is that you said that your parents wanted you to take a certain path. And that reminded me, like, society often wants to dictate how your life should be, but you knew deep down in your core, like, that wasn't for you. There was something else out there for you. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were great and supportive, but I mean, nowadays with social media and everything, everybody's got some connection to these crazy dreams that they have. You can all of a sudden connect with Hollywood or connect with athletes or singers or business people. There was no outlet for that, obviously, when I was growing up. And the idea of going to Hollywood and be a stand-up comic was so horrifying to my parents after they worked their asses off to put me through school and college and things like that. So it wasn't that they weren't supportive. They just thought it was ridiculous, And I really didn't know a single person when I got to Los Angeles besides my wife to be, who I actually met on the phone before that. But so it was more of like just a pipe dream. But my parents were supportive. They gave me a year and said, we'll support you financially for a year. Let's see what happens. And I ended up, doing that amateur stand-up circuit, getting a job, making a short film. And then I got into the American Film Institute, which is AFI, and a great program. So I went there for a year. And then I was lucky enough when I came out, I made another short film and someone hired me to do a movie. And I kind of sort of kept working for a number of years until I hit the typical Hollywood stumbling block. But
So when you went out to Hollywood or LA, you didn't know anyone except for your wife or your ex-wife at the time. Was that scary, or you basically like, I'm this is my dream, this is what I'm going to make happen, and that's that. There's no plan B.
I mean, you know what? I definitely, when I look back at it now, I definitely do things impulsively without a real sense of a plan, which is never a good idea. But but I just didn't have a choice. I could not, I was applying to law schools, and I was like, it's not for me. I'm never going to make it through. So I don't know. I mean, it is weird when I look back at it. I have no idea. Like I said, I was not a social person. I was not the guy going out, meeting people and making connections and this and that. So I focused. I would go to these comedy clubs. I got jobs at a temp agency, which one led to New Line Cinema, which was just, I mean, they were doing well, but they were really at the beginning, and made some good connections there. And fortunately, one of the Mike DeLuca, who was the VP there, saw me do stand-up and gave me money to make a short film. And then I ended up selling the short film to Showtime, which they don't really do that anymore. But back then they bought some short films and it was great. So I definitely had some breaks along the way. But if I was scared, I probably wouldn't have done it. But if I really took the time to think about it, I also might not have done it,
Yeah. And both those things are so relatable to me. And I don't think it was that you got so lucky. There's an old expression, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And there you were busting your ass at New Line and doing stand-up on the side, and something transpired from that. So that's
what?
fantastic.
I don't want to oversell it. Like I said, everyone in this town, you need a break. And you have to have some talent. I was fortunate enough to have. You have to have some work ethic and passion, but you really do need some breaks. And whatever, coming into contact with whatever people, of course, preparation leads to better opportunities, but still you do need some breaks. And I was fortunate enough to get them,
Yeah, I love that. And it seems to me like everything that, I was listening to you about you is you're not afraid of failure, because even before with the movies, when you started doing that, you went back to New York and you performed at Caroline's, and you had a bunch of family members and friends come out. And I think you said that didn't go as planned, but you didn't give a shit. You just kept pushing and kept doing your thing.
I don't know if I said I didn't give a shit, because that was definitely one of the low points of my early career. Because when I did amateur stand-up, and listen, everyone can say whatever they want about themselves, but I was pretty good. And if I would have focused and worked on that and really loved that lifestyle, I'm not saying I would have made it, but I was okay. So when I was doing it in LA, I really didn't bomb a lot. And when I got to New York, I just loaded this place up with Long Island. I mean, 90% of Merrick was at this place, and I'm an amateur, and there are professional comedians there. And I took out the place and said, hey, put my fucking name on the marquee. I'm going to fill the fucking place, which is difficult for a stand-up place when they don't have a big name coming in. So it was good for them. and it should have been good for me. Unfortunately, my first joke did not go well. And I looked out and saw my fucking sixth grade girlfriend, my parents, my aunt, my best friends. And when there was silence, I was like, all right, thank you. Good night. And I walked up the stage and all of them had driven in from the island. And like my father's best friend called me the next day and said, you're ruining your father's life. You need to like figure out what you're doing with yourself. So I cared. But what I said to them was, I'm like, listen, that was just, I had a meltdown. I had an anxiety meltdown. But it's not really indicative of whatever my talents may be. So I pressed forward, but it was definitely a roadblock for sure, you know?
And just to clarify, when I say you didn't care, I don't mean that like you're not a human, it didn't hit you and like touch your heart, but it didn't stop you from pursuing your dreams.
Yeah. I mean, at that point I was pretty relentless, you know, and
love that word.
You know, I've hit a bunch of times, even, you know, before, like everyone thinks my career started in Entourage, but I made 2 movies that I was hired for. But I made 2 movies that's both sold to studios, which is nearly impossible for independent films to go sell. So I sold the short film to Showtime, and then I made 2 movies that both sold to major studios and played around the world. And at 30, this movie I did, Kissing a Fool, was bought by Universal with David Schwimmer and Amelia Avital and Jason Lee and Bonnie Hunt. And I was the hot young comedic director for about 5 minutes until the movie opened up. And it didn't make the kind of money that whoever thought it should make. And it just all turned. And I was working for 10 years, owned a house, was about to have my first child. I could not get any job after this. And I thought about going back to law school at that point, which I was like, I can't believe this is my fucking life. I bought a house in Beverly Hills. Things are like, I've been successful for a while. And all of a sudden it seemed over. And again, with that kind of feeling of not giving up, a friend of mine suggested I try television. And I wrote a Curb Your Enthusiasm spec, which it's nuts that you know, Curb is still going. And that's the show that I wrote before Entourage even started.
That is crazy.
I gave it to my manager, who was a friend of mine, another Long Island guy who represented Mark Wahlberg, who I also was friendly with. And he was like, you know, Mark and I were talking about this thing. You know, we don't really know what it is yet, but it's Mark and his friends in Hollywood. And you should write it, which I'm like, well, I'm glad you didn't think about me. You know, you only know me for 20 years. I'm glad it took me to write another script for you to think maybe I was the guy for this, but that's how it happened. And, you know, I was really this close to leaving the business at that point. So it's crazy to think about. You know?
But you didn't though.
I did not, and I wrote that script, which again, you know, so much of my career, the short film I made, that script, was stuff doing on my own. Nobody paying me, nobody giving a shit, and like sitting in my house and going, this is what I want to try to do. And then I'll let people see it and think what they think, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And then, so how did the idea, like, how was it born to make Entourage exactly what it was? I know you said it was like a combination of kind of Mark's early years and also yours.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? It's obviously Mark is the inspiration for it, but I told Mark from the get-go, I got to make it New York. I don't know anything about Boston. And while people could go, oh, they're similar, you know, there's those subtle differences that really made a huge difference. And Mark's crew out here was not like the crew I wanted to write. Mark's crew was friends that have kind of joined them along the way. My crew was guys I know from kindergarten, from Merrick, John F. Kennedy High School, Lakeside Elementary School. And I wanted to write what I knew. So I used the success of Mark's career and then kind of my own obstacles of my career and really use the friendships and the stories that happened in my life to infuse it into the show, you know?
Love that. That's great. And then just going back for a second, so we're going to jump around a little bit. So many things about your character just are so reminiscent to mine, and I appreciate it so much. Like, I know you had said like you had obsessive OCD and work ethic with things that you love. And like, if you're not inspired by something, it's hard to get after it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, which is a lot of writers. I'm a complete procrastinator, which is horrible. And writing is for most people, it's a painful experience, you know? And especially, like I said, I'm my own harshest critic, and I've taken fucking plenty of professional criticism. So I say that sincerely. When they write shit, I care a lot less than what I think about something. But, often when you're writing, especially me, I write a lot of stuff in my head and then I just try to translate it onto the paper. And sometimes it doesn't translate the way I seem to have thought of it. So it's a painful process and you got to just kind of sit your ass down and move through it. So that's the big key for it,
Let me ask you, just for the audience, because this is very valuable. What's a technique that you try to utilize to prevent procrastination? Because I know we all deal with it at some point.
Honestly, there is none. There is none. There is like I mean, I have scenes in Entourage that really are my life of just looking in the mirror and going, "You little fucking bitch." Which, by the way, I'm not saying they stole it, but you can look at this scene in Entourage with Kevin Dillon, Johnny Drama, like in the mirror going, "You're a bitch," and then Leo does the exact same thing in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Not saying it was stolen, more that that's what writers go through. And it's like you try to be your own life coach motivational. I know I can sit down and write, but you have to do it. And sometimes you can see this space behind me. This is like, I don't know. Right now, this is where I'm working at it. This is like 10 by 12, I guess. I've done, I'm working on a new show right now. I've done 10 miles. I have my watch. I've done 10 miles in this room in a day, which means instead of just sitting down and typing, I'm fucking wasting time. And I did that when I was a child. I've done it my entire life. So, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's just your process." It's not a good process. And you say, "What's the technique?" The technique is to fucking sit down and go, "I'm going to starve to death if I don't go do my job. I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be embarrassed." And that's why for me and a lot of procrastinators, deadlines are good for me. Whether I self-impose them or somebody else that I'm working for does, they're usually helpful,
Yeah, it gives accountability.
Yep.
So Entourage was born. My favorite TV show of all time. I'm sure that if you asked, 100 people around my generation and yours, they'd probably, most of them would agree as well. What a phenomenon. How did the cast come about?
The cast was just casting, and, my producer actually represented Adrian and Jerry, so he had them in his pocket. But Jeremy Piven was the only one that I knew I wanted. I wrote him into my first outline. I loved him on Larry Sanders, and I thought he would be great for this. The rest of the people auditioned, and, we probably took 6 months to find the right cast. And again, it was very important to me that they were New Yorkers, authentic, that they felt like guys I grew up with. And from minute one, when I got those 4 guys together, Jeremy was obviously the agent and could be from anywhere and whatever. But those 4 guys needed to feel like people that I grew up with. And from minute one, when we got them in a room together, that's what it felt like.
Yeah. And we'll get to Ari in a second, who I think is without question the greatest, most brilliant TV character of all time, just the way he was written. So the show was, I heard you speaking about this a little bit earlier today. A lot of people think it's about, I guess it's all 4 of them, but to you, a lot of it was about E, who reflects you a lot in many ways. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's not about all 4 of them, but he was the lead. It was seen through his eyes. I mean, when I started the show, it was like, okay, how do we make a show about Hollywood that doesn't feel like it's about Hollywood? And to me, it was the fish out of water element of, essentially Long Islanders. I made them from Queens. I wanted them to be, even though we know we got a lot of crazy tough guys in Long Island, there's kind of that image of Long Island that it's a bunch of, rich Jewish kids, and, I think, from Merrick, I mean,
Yes.
the serial killers and psychopaths that we grew up with, that's more closer to Goodfellas than, I don't know what, Keeping Up with the Steins or whatever that Piven movie. But I mean, it was important to me that it felt like regular Joes, fish out of water in this fantastical world, and that the show was really about friendship and loyalty much more than Hollywood business or any of that, even though there was obviously plenty of that.
Yeah, I love that. And the character Ari, how accurate or loosely portrayed is it after the real agent?
I mean, obviously he's a huge inspiration for it. But again, a lot of the elements of Ari's life on the show were more my life. My son played Ari's son. His wife, Perry Reeves, was based on my now ex-wife. But, I mean, so her name was Melissa, and, they look alike and everything. So I took a lot of those elements. The business aspects and kind of the audacity of the real Ari were stuff that I brought in there, but it was obviously also a lot of dialogue that would enter my head. That's things that most people wouldn't say in a room full of people, but that's where it came about.
Yeah, and the show was so memorable for so many reasons. So I couldn't picture any other actor playing any of the roles on the show.
Neither can I. Neither can I. And there really weren't any second choices for anybody, except at one point when we first started. Dominic Lombardozzi, who's a good friend of mine, the group was a little tougher. It was a little more Wahlberg-esque, and Dom was actually on the wire and was unavailable. And when we got Adrian, who's obviously not that kind of Mark Wahlberg type of guy, it actually cemented more of what the group would be. That was, I don't mean to call them soft, but a little softer than Mark and his guys, And I can't picture anybody. And I brought Dom on the show as quickly as I possibly could because I love him and he's an amazing actor. But I can't picture anyone playing Turtle besides Jerry, and I can't picture anyone. They were all perfect castings.
Perfect. 10 out of 10. Something I always look forward to when I was watching the show, because I always had such an infatuation with the movie business. So seeing all the behind the scenes stuff it's just so cool for someone specifically like me, seeing how it all comes together. Also, all the cameos. I used to love that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. It started out first season, almost impossible to get anybody. And then, by 3-4, we started getting the calls from LeBron James and from, Tom Brady, whoever else. So that obviously was very cool. And, some people used to say, oh, there's too many cameos, which is so stupid because that is the lifestyle. I mean, Mark, when we screened the movie, I just finished the cut of the movie and Mark's like, well, screen it at my house. I'm like, great. He's like, come over. I come over and like Kevin Durant's sitting in a chair, like no big deal. And he's like, no, you don't care if Kevin watches. And then another night we have like right after they won the championship, it's like the Golden State Warriors. We go over and we screen it for like Steph and Draymond and everybody. And, that's his life, So I tried to make it always realism was the key to me. And I think some of the haters would be like, oh, they just throw in cameos, but it really is what it is like. So,
yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And everything you're saying makes sense to me. So when you started the first season, obviously you never know exactly what you're going to get when you start any venture, just like when I started my CLS thing. And, I'm so grateful to be where it is now. But when did you realize, like, what moment were you like, we're on to something huge here? This is going to be great.
I'm never get that positive, but season 2, when we were filming in Vegas, the show season 1 had just started airing, and we went out to the pool, and Jerry went out, and fucking 200 Long Island, New Jersey, Queens meatheads were like, Turtle! And I was like, it almost felt like a setup. And, that's when I'm like, wow, people are watching this because, the ratings had changed really quickly because of TiVo and stuff. So the numbers did not reflect what was actually happening. So that was when I got the vibe. And then I would literally be at restaurants and hear people talking about the show next to me, which would be obviously very cool. But I never sat back and was like, oh, we got a monster. I was just like, okay, now what are we going to do? We got to keep this fucking going. So that was kind of my mindset.
Yeah. And that's the great mindset. It's like you've never arrived because you're always pushing forward, always trying to, make it better.
That's how I was.
Yeah. I love that. Now, how realistic is a lot of the stuff that's shown on the show? Because I always was so infatuated, thought it was so cool how, like I just said earlier, like behind the scenes stuff, and even like the negotiations with the deals. How real, raw, and authentic is this?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's 100% real. I mean, most stuff was taken from something, whether it was a deal with me or Mark or somebody else. But for the most part, I tried to be as realistic as possible. The least realistic thing about the whole show is that 4 guys pushing 30 get to hang out this much. You know what I mean? Like that's, somewhat unrealistic. We kept, relationships to a minimum with the guys, which usually interfere with all that stuff. But the Hollywood stuff was, for the time, certainly spot on. A lot of people talk about that. Like, oh, this didn't age well because, how Ari speaks. I find that to be the stupidest fucking comment of all time. That's what it was like back then. Again, I'm not, Ari, I love Ari, the real Ari, great guy, but he would say shit that you would just be like, whoa, you know what I mean? And 2021, you're not going to speak like that in an office, but 2003, women spoke like that, men spoke like that, and that's what it was,
Yeah, now you have to be so politically correct with everything.
Well, look, some things are about politically incorrect and some things are about, we grow up and go, maybe you shouldn't fucking talk to 22-year-old assistants that way. Maybe you should try to build people up. So I think, to me, it's like I see an Ari character, and we actually did do an episode where he kind of got accused of a slight sexual harassment thing. But I think, the world of the real Aris who were good people at their heart, I think they grew up in a business where that just was acceptable behavior. And hopefully everybody grows while still is managing to keep their sense of humor and everything else about them,
Yeah. Some of the scenes with Ari, I still like, I'll go to YouTube every now and then, and I'll just go to like a compilation of all Ari Gold scenes, legitimately die laughing, like uncontrollably.
Right.
Like what a perfect fit, Jeremy Piven. Like, what was that like on set? Like when he was really in his element on fire, like, could you help yourself but die laughing at some of the scenes?
You know what? Piven was so good, but it's tough to make me laugh because I already hear it in my head. And, Jeremy really is, like I say, there's no one on the planet Earth who could have been better than him in that role. But me, I'm always like, I have my own meter of what everything sounds like. So when an actor comes to it, while they might be saying the exact words, there's sometimes that things sound different from me. So the perfect balance is when the two are able to come together and go, okay, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And we were able to do that. But I was not a guy, even though our set, by the way, was a great, fun, light set. I was not a guy that was breaking out into laughing. I was a guy who I didn't even watch. I would close my eyes because I was more of a listener and I would want to hear the words. So it was tough to get me laughing, though.
Interesting. I take it as a challenge.
Yeah, no, it's not that it's tough in life. It's just when I'm like on the set.
Very serious.
Well, it's not even serious. It's just, it doesn't necessarily surprise me. I feel like I've seen it. And it's a little bit of that control freak. I want what I want. And the actor, of course, has their own choices. And you have to find the ability to manage that. And, people always say, like, who would you have played? And I say Ari. And Jeremy used to say, hey, do you want to do it? And I know I never could have in a million years, which is so weird because I wrote it and I hear it. But that Jeremy has this ability to take it. And usually what would happen with me is if I was on the set and I was fucking frustrated for whatever reason, after I'd watch it a couple of times over, then I would start to get the combination. So that's why I say it really has to be a collaboration. And everybody has to give in to certain things because the actor is not just a guy who's there to recite dialogue. Otherwise anyone could do it. And Jeremy brought this intangible energy to everything that was just amazing. And I used to say about the show, that's what I want in every moment, energy. I don't want people to rest on this. I wanted the show when it ended for people to go, that's it. And when people used to call me up and go, how fucking long is this show? I'd be happy because even when it was a full 30 minutes, they thought it was too short. And my goal in life is never to bore people. That's the attempt, at least,
Yeah, I love that. And I feel the same way. Like when I do some of these inspirational videos, everyone's like, why don't you make a longer one? But I feel the same way, like always leave them wanting a little more, like less is more. And I'll say this as a fan, when I was growing up, it used to be a little frustrating that it would end so quickly, but that's just because it was such quality for 24 minutes or however long it was with the intros and the outro. Unbelievable.
Well, I think it's weird because now you can binge it. And Entourage really is a show that's probably meant to be binged because it's one of those shows where you're like, fuck, that was quick. Boom, boom. But they weren't short. They weren't shorter than, whatever other half hour HBO shows you were watching. They just hopefully moved quicker,
Yeah. Now, when you're in the zone and you're filming this show, what's the schedule like? It's a grind?
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, especially if I'm writing too. That was where the real hell. You want to get the scripts finished first if possible, but a lot of times I was writing while filming, getting on the set, running back to the writer's room. So yeah, it's a grind. While that being said, it was still one of the more fun sets to be around, and not just because there were good-looking people all over the place. It was just a good group of people, and it was we're kind of like a family, and that's how we are on this podcast. It's basically like, and I don't mean the guys only, the women, everybody was just like a group of buddies hanging around,
Yeah. And we'll get into the podcast in a second. So I absolutely love it. And I love what you're doing with it. I'm such a fan. just real quickly, going back for a second, because I'm so curious. When you were hired to make the pilot and get it going, like, how does that process work? Do you have to present them with a pilot and then like the studio will say, let's make more? Or did you make the first season? How does it work?
No, I mean, different now, but then you sell a script, 50,000 bucks was what they paid me. A year and a half later, they're still harassing me with notes after notes after notes after notes. And I think we started filming probably 20 months after we sold that. So not a lot of money not a lot of money to get rolling. Once we shoot the pilot, another 2 months of them deciding whether they're going to move forward. And then they ordered 7 more, which I feel good about the number 7, because that's what Larry David said they gave Seinfeld, 7 episodes, which means they're not really sure what they got here or if they care. If they're sure, they're like, okay, let's do 20, So we did 8. And when we got picked up, I mean, I worked on a pilot for 2 years. And unlike today also, like, you could not walk into a studio today and say, here's my idea for the pilot. I'll figure out the rest later. That's what I did. And I was lucky, because today it'd be like, okay, what's the first season? What's the plan for season 2, 3, 4? And now they may order the whole season to start with and shoot 8 to 10, 12, 14 episodes right off the gate. But they picked up the pilot and then they say 7 more. And that's when I panicked and said, I have no idea what the show is or where it's going. And I really did, with the help, I brought in some Long Islanders and, we figured it out as we went along. So.
Yeah, love that. In regards to the movie, was that always a part of the vision?
No, I mean, I didn't even want to do the movie. That was, Mark called me and said, are you fucking crazy? We're going to, we'll re-syndicate the show. We'll do a cartoon. We'll do a fucking Broadway musical. We'll do an opera. Unfortunately, the movie didn't perform as well as some people would have liked it to, which, for me, I wanted to make that movie very inexpensively. I said it from the get-go. I said, we're not Sex and the City. Sex and the City is a romantic comedy. It's got a movie star at the center of it. And nobody should keep comparing a show about 5 guys in Hollywood to Sex and the City. So I wanted to make it for a lot less money, even though it was still a cheap movie and it didn't lose any money, but it didn't explode. We did really great the first couple of days and then it slowed down. So I would have never done the movie. I would have preferred another season if we were going to do anything. But it was fun either way.
Yeah. And regardless, the whole show as a package with the movie, 10 out of 10. I'm sure if you ask anyone, they'd agree with that.
Well, I don't know about anyone, but thank you. Definitely, I think the the PC culture turned on Entourage for several years, and the movie hit the Me Too movement right smack in the face. I feel like it's turning now. I think the podcast has been a big reason for that. But the positivity towards the show and the new people finding it now during the pandemic has been pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. And so you took full advantage of the pandemic in regard to that, right?
Because, I mean, listen, Kevin Connolly, who played Eric on the show, he called me up, said, I want you to do a podcast. And I was like, about what? And I always wanted to do a radio show. Howard Stern is like, we all do. Obviously, we love him. And it's something I always wanted to do, but I never had any idea how you get into that. So Kevin said this, and he said, we'll talk about a little about Entourage. I said, I really don't want to talk about Entourage. I want to talk about X, Y, Z. He said, we'll do it all. I said, all right, let's give it a shot. And in my wildest dreams, I never expected it to work the way it's working and to be as much fun as it's been. And getting together with them, getting everybody else back together. Jeremy's been on, Jerry's been on, most of the cast has been on. It's just been a lot of fun. What's
yeah.
up, Baron?
How crazy is this journey that you're on right now? Just looking back and reflecting for a second, like after you thought, you were just saying like about 15 minutes ago, like you thought it might be done. You had this success. And then the movie bombed and there was some bad reviews. And then to, linking up with Entourage and so forth now with the podcast. What a ride.
Listen, there's been so many ups and downs. After Entourage, I do another pilot that I'll never fucking forgive HBO that they didn't pick it up. Like the shit that they put on the air instead of us, Michael Imperioli, Eddie Burns, Michael Rappaport, and it was fucking excellent.
It's a great cast.
They passed on it. And then I produced another pilot that John Ridley wrote and Spike Lee directed. And John Boyega played a loose version of Mike Tyson. It was loosely inspired by Mike. And that was after Entourage, and the world just seemed like my career was just like the next 40 years were set. And they passed on both of those shows, and it was kind of back to before Entourage. Like, you know what? This fucking business, I don't have the patience for it. I can't stand these fucking people. And it was the kind of the same feeling as I had right before Entourage. And then the pandemic, my buddy from London convinced me to write a script that I was never going to write, which, you know, we're now hopefully shooting in London. It's called Day Ones, which is similar themes to Entourage, set in the world of premier football, soccer to you and I, loosely based on Thierry Henry. And I got Matthew Vaughn, who directed Kingsman, and some other stuff directing it. And then the podcast. So it's been, you know, while the pandemic has been a horrific thing for me, it got me at least to sit down and go, okay, again, do the same thing, write a script for free. Nobody's paying me. Nobody gives a shit about it. And so far, so good. So it's been a good year for that. Obviously, I got 2 kids who are suffering through all this shit, and obviously all the other things that people are going through. So hopefully things will improve then. But yeah, for me, it's been a good, productive year, you know?
Yeah. There's always a move to be made. And a lot of people are, you know, not taking advantage of some extra time. And I appreciate the fact that you are. I admire that about you, dog. When you get in the zone and you're on fire with a script, like you're very inspired, how does that, like, do you go like days at a clip, or do you just set aside a schedule every single day? Like when you get really in the zone?
Yeah, I'm never in the zone anymore, unfortunately. You know, I'm in the zone when I'm doing the podcast. Writing is a chore. It's a job. Most writers will tell you the same thing. I like reading what I wrote far better than writing. You know what I mean? Like like I said, I'm very hard on myself. And then usually I read it the next day and I'm like, wow, it's pretty good. And then I give it to like someone I trust and they tell me the problems. And I'm like, yeah, they're kind of right. It kind of sucks. And then I start rewriting it. Where you going, bud? And and he's bored. My dog's bored. So
Get him back in here. He's gonna want to hear this.
Yeah, Baron. So you know, it's zone is rare, you know. I mean, I had a zone with that curb spec I wrote. I wrote it in 2 hours, and I had a zone with an Entourage episode I wrote that I actually got nominated for an Emmy for. There were episodes that took me 6 months, and this one episode took me like a few hours, and just everything seemed to come together.
Which one?
It was season 2 where Jeremy got fired. Ari got fired because he was trying to start his own agency. So some things just click, and then sometimes you find yourself in situations where you're trying to. I don't know what's wrong with this guy. What's wrong with you? What's wrong? He's not a nervous dog.
It's a good-looking dog, Doug.
Oh, he's the best. He's the best.
What's his name?
So, Baron, named after Baron Davis.
Nice to meet you, Baron.
So, you know, the zone is, again, it's not something I believe in. It's getting down and writing is the job and the work, and really the hard work comes in when you rewrite, and the real challenge is to get it right on that thing. So, like I said, I feel like I get in zones on the podcast, like when you play sports. And again, I'm not touting my athletic ability, although my pickleball is pretty fucking good. But but you know, when you feel like you're on the basketball court and you can't miss, like sometimes I feel like that when I'm doing the podcast. Rarely do I feel like that when I'm writing. When I'm writing, I'm feeling like, don't stop now. Keep going. Keep going. So it's a grind. It always has been, and I'm guessing it always will be.
And listen, that's okay, because now you pivoted into the podcast and you're thriving. So maybe that's the new thing.
Let's hope it works. I mean, so far so good. And I hope to keep growing it. And, you know, like hopefully, you know, everybody's got a new podcast starting every single day. So you got new competition every day. It's not like, oh, you got Entourage on the air and there's going to be 600 new shows that come on Sunday night. Now a podcast every single day. You got one every day. Somebody else has one. So, but I'm loving doing it. And like I said, the more important thing for me is that I'm enjoying it, you know? So
yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yep.
I've heard you say in the past, Doug, that you're motivated a little bit by anger, or sometimes that can fuel you.
That's true. And it's funny because that's what I'm working on with this script on this Thierry Henry character. Yeah. Like, you know, they're trying to get him to play better in the football world. And that's what they find his trigger is anger, even though he doesn't know it. And it's not a healthy thing, by the way. This is not a good thing, but anger has fueled me a lot. Yeah, for sure.
Like, what do you mean exactly?
there's a million things. I hold a grudge when someone pisses me off. If someone tells me I can't do something, I get angry rather than oh, okay, I'll prove you wrong. I get fucking pissed. I'm like, I will shove it down your fucking throat. I have that New York Merrick attitude, and it's just always how I have been,
Yeah, but listen, it also adds to your motivation sometimes.
Yeah, but again, it's not a healthy emotion. There's other ways to find it. Like I said earlier, a lot of people say, oh, that's just your process. Your process, if you're making money and people are liking what you're doing, does not mean your process is healthy for your personal life or for other things. Yeah. So everything is finding a balance,
But also, you can change what you associate anger to.
Maybe. Well, you're going into therapy now, so possibly. But I've been in therapy and I've tried lots of things. I mean, listen, maybe I'm getting better, but I'll tell you this: like the scenes with Ari and his wife were like verbatim my scenes in therapy with my ex-wife. And when I was doing the podcast, now I watch the show over just to get ready for the podcast, and I was watching it with my girlfriend, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're so Ari," and I was like, "Fuck, am I?" So I'm not sure I'm improving or not,
That's funny. And one visual that just came to mind is he's in therapy with his wife, and he's trying not to bug out, and ends up punching the therapist picture frame right through it.
Not the therapist picture frame, the therapist cat in the picture frame, which was my cat.
Really?
That was my kitten in that picture frame.
Are you kidding me?
Unfortunately, Tex is no longer with us. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Like if Tex was here, by the way, it was a Bengal cat. Can you see that door frame over there?
Yes.
He would sit on that 2-inch wide door frame like it was a beautiful king-size bed.
Really?
And jump up there from the floor. Unfortunately, he's not with us, so you're making me sad now. He's a great cat.
But I'm sure you have the memories. Sorry to hear that,
buddy. You're not a cat guy, I can tell.
I don't mind cats. I'm more of a dog guy, but
exactly, you don't mind them. I love them, and the dog. I love all the animals. So
yeah, fair enough. So in regards to the victory of the podcast, I think it's fantastic. I thought it was going to be a little bit more on Entourage, and I'm happy that it's more about like you, the man, because I loved your story and I'm so inspired by you, and I love how you have everyone talk about like their lives and stuff. What's the premise for the show? Like, what's the goal with it?
I mean, it's ever evolving, but the goal is to have, a radio show where we can talk about everything. I mean, the thing is, just like Entourage, the theme of it is friendship and loyalty, and that's what I want to come out of every episode. We're branching out to things. We got Andrew Whitworth from the Rams coming on Wednesday, which is like our first kind of completely out of Entourage world, but he's a fan of the show, and I'm going to talk to him about the friendships with the team and how he grew up and whether he's got any of the kind of crew with him. So it'll all kind of be in that mode, but we talk about everything: relationships, careers, life, everything,
Yeah, and I love that you're still so close with everybody from the cast and whatnot. Special.
Yeah, it was a great group, and a lot of people always say that about me from college and from high school. Like I said, my best friends in the world I know since I'm 5 or 6 years old. I mean, we have a group text with 16 or 17 people from Merrick Belmore that I know my whole life, girls, guys, etc. And that's a special thing. And that's why the new show called Day Ones is kind of about that same element. It's how I've lived my life. It's how, most of my relationships were formed. So
I love that. Where is Adrian now? How come he's not in movies?
I think he's doing a show for Netflix. I don't know, but I don't know what he wants to save the world. I don't know. Everybody's got different paths of what they want to do, but I don't know.
Yeah, I love that. Let me ask you a question, dog, because people always ask me, like, who am I inspired by? And most of the people that I'm inspired by are people that, I try to get on the show, like you and so forth. And I'm always sharpening the axe, so to speak, and journaling. And I just get inspiration. I use the world as my playground, all different people for different reasons. Yeah. Who are some people that you sharpen the axe to or that have inspired you over the years?
I mean, obviously there's comedic inspirations: Larry David, Woody Allen, Albert Brooks, John Cleese, etc. But lots of people inspire me. Athletes inspire me a lot. Tom Brady. I mean, I watch what he's doing, at this age. When I posted on Instagram 2 years ago, like, anyone who doesn't appreciate that what this man did with his career, and another Super Bowl win, another Super Bowl win. So, that inspires me. And a lot of his outlook on health and his outlook on on pushing forward with something that he loves. I mean, I think he's fucking out of his mind. I mean, like
in the best way.
In the best way, but also like I love football. I would never want to be a professional football player. There's nothing in me that would ever want to put my body through that. I'd want to be a professional basketball player, professional tennis player. So, but I'm inspired by the fact that he loves this so much, and everybody at the greatest of all time to almost be considered a joke, like that you're going to keep going. You're fucking 42 years old. Who do you think you are? We all get caught up. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to eat better than I ever did. I'm going to work out harder than I ever did. And I'm going to be as good as I ever was. And so there's a lot of those guys, athletes that inspire me, but music and lots of things, people in business as well,
You and Tom Brady have a couple things in common now that I think about it.
Yeah. What's that?
Number one, you're both relentless.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, whatever.
You're very hard on yourself.
I'm not hard on myself. I'm not Tom Brady. I love Tom Brady. I've been around Tom Brady. He was on the show, and he's fucking unreal. He really is. And listen, I don't know him like in the closed doors of his life, but he's got that calm, chill. I don't have that. I'm a fucking angry motherfucker. He's got a very centered, as far as I see, and did a smart, thoughtful approach, figured out what team he could work best with. I mean, and he just did it. I mean, it's really, it is inspirational. And to any guy, I'm now 52, but to anyone in their 40s who really does think, wow, time is not on my side anymore, to see him go do that. And I don't care if you're a fucking diehard Jet fan or Giant fan. It's just amazing, I
absolutely agree. And of course, I've been in New York my whole life, except college was in Connecticut, but I couldn't agree more. And I recently posted also the same thing. Anyone that doesn't respect this man, it was before the Super Bowl. I was like, he took a new team with no ability to have a training camp to build chemistry all the way to the Super Bowl. He's already won. And then
I posted this 2 years ago saying goodbye.
I know.
Saying goodbye. Thanks for the memories, Tom. And then he goes and wins another one. And honestly, there's no reason they don't have a shot at winning it again. I mean, that's what's so nuts,
They have a ton of talent. Now can they get everybody back? But even if they don't get some of the people back, they have Tom at the helm.
Yeah, look, they got a shot. And that's all you can ask. And when you got that guy, I mean, obviously anything can happen. And, I'm going to talk to Andrew Whitworth about the Chiefs because, there were some people who I think are we talking sports at all? But some people who are like, oh, Mahomes didn't look like Mahomes, which is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. The guy was being chased around like there was no offensive line at all. And I want to talk to Whitworth this week on our podcast about what difference he thinks he would have made if he was on the Chiefs, because I think it would have been an enormous difference,
Yeah, but also the D line of Tampa Bay is no joke.
Of course it's not a joke, but it was a different game the week before because they could have easily lost to Green Bay, and Green Bay's offense is not as good as KC's offense was. So football, what's amazing about Brady, obviously his leadership and obviously his talent, but you need some breaks to have a full football team. It's not like LeBron, who can basically go, give me the ball and get the fuck out of the way. So I think there's combinations that are just.
No, what he's done in the sport of football is unbelievable. Anyone that can't acknowledge that, it's a personal problem. How do you deal with Doug? How do you deal with haters? I know it's something you're still working on.
I mean, I fight with them and yell at them and hope for their demise in many different ways. But I'm starting to ignore it. And honestly, like I said, and they'll, if I start talking about stuff like this on podcasts, they'll come back. But the hate is turned. I mean, it really has. There was so much. I'd get so much shit on my Instagram, and it's turned, and the positivity. And I think people have, again, reappreciated the show, other works I've done. So it's been nice, but I don't like haters, and I find public haters like I hate. I'm not even going to tell you. I think there is a forum for critics, people who just sit back and critique other people. I find just to be the lowest forms of life. And I know it's, you want that. You want to go see a movie. You want to hear what some guy has to say about it. But it's just, but as most smart people will tell you, it's a real waste of time to spend any minute on any of them,
Yeah.
But it's also a form of procrastination, to be honest with you. I mean, to spend, I used to read about, and, it's tough to talk about Woody Allen now with all the shit that happened to him, but he was such an idol of mine growing up, forgetting his personal life. But, he would finish a script and just start the next one. He never read reviews. That didn't affect his life at all. And for 20 years ago, I used to be like, I'm going to be like that, but I can't. And, I've written shit to critics when they write about me, and I wish them and their family to have very bad existences, because I do. I despise them, and people who just, because they're almost coming out and trying to affect your career rather than and bringing their own stupid personal opinions to it. So anyway,
because
you see how I feel. I think.
Yeah, I could feel it. It's supposed to not be personal, but it is. It feels like an attack sometimes.
It is. To me, it always is. But
Doug, how do you avoid a burnout?
I'm not the guy to answer that. Tom Brady's the guy to answer that. But,
But like, for example, right before Entourage got going and you said to yourself, I don't know if this is it for me, you didn't leave and you kept going, and look what happened.
I needed money. Honestly, I was, a lot of fear kept me going, a fear of literally like not having enough money to eat and take care of my kids and put them through school. But after Entourage, I was kind of burned out, and I did this other show I told you about called 40, and HBO didn't pick it up, which again is mind-boggling to me. But after I finished it and I loved the pilot and was like, oh my God, this cast is unfucking believable, I was like, I really don't know if I can do this again. I'm not sure I want to grind for another 8 years. And even now I'm working on this new show, and the grind it's a lot. So it's important. And again, I don't have the answers because I don't do it well. It's important to balance your life. Entourage, I spent 5 years. New Year's Eve, I was sitting in the office while my family was in Hawaii, and I'm writing scripts. And there are plenty of people who don't do it that way and are much more efficient. So it's finding that balance is how you can avoid a burnout,
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you said that, because since I started my CLS, and I'll be straight up with you, I'm working 20-hour days. I don't have a lot of balance at all. But, when you start something and you're super inspired by it, as you can relate to, there's nothing else that you'd rather be doing.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful. I'm so into it. But balance is definitely something I need to work on, because even if you're doing what you love, at some point, I'm sure you could burn out if you're burning the candles.
Yeah, and you want to have a personal life as well. But I do believe when you're starting your own business, which a TV show essentially is, it's 24/7. I mean, when I'm writing, I'm in the shower thinking about it. I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden my mind is thinking about what I'm working on, and I'm not even watching the show anymore. So, but that's a problem when you're sitting with your wife or your girlfriend and you're not listening to a word she says. She doesn't care that you like have a script problem in your head. So you got to find that.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. I'm all in on things that I'm very passionate about. Another question I wanted to ask you, Doug, is what's the mindset required when you are going through adversity? And obviously in Hollywood, just like business or life, there's a lot of ups and downs. No one's career or life just goes in a straight line unless you're coasting and you're not really taking a shot. But when you do hit those lows, what mindset do you need? What character trait to continue on and bounce up?
Yeah, well, I mean, persistence is one, but every therapist has always told me, for someone like me, it's not taking things personally. Like it really is. I mean, you got to remind yourself, I've given in scripts that people hate that ultimately become successful or don't. It doesn't really matter. You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to understand that they may not see what you see, or they may have a valid point that you need to listen to. So I think all of life is about trying not to take things so personally, trying to think what's going on in the other person's head. This business, a singer-songwriter, of course, there's a difficult journey, but they sing their song, they play it, and this and that. I can't do that. If I want to make a television show, I need millions and millions of dollars from someone else. I need an entire cast and crew to come together to be right. So it's a very collaborative situation, and you really need to learn how to manage lots of people's thoughts and opinions. I think, but those are the things that I try on a daily basis to work on, which is not taking things personally. I mean, it's the key to every situation and every argument, and to try to hear what other people are saying,
Yeah. And also something that you just mentioned, like your set seems like was such like a family oriented vibe and so special how everybody did come together. Are there a lot of sets that aren't like that and it just makes for an awkward experience?
Well, I mean, I've only been on my sets, but I think if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear a lot of actors, which makes me really happy, say they've never been on anything like us. So yeah, there are sets where it's just you're there to work as if you're at an accounting firm. So to me, that would not work creatively, but to those people it did. So or didn't, then they fired people. But my life has always been about trying to be inclusive and trying to make the people that are there to help me feel like I appreciate it. That's what I've attempted to do, at least, you know?
I love that. And with that being said, what would you like to be acknowledged for the most in terms of the show Entourage?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, you know what exactly what we're talking about. The fact that 15, 20 years later, almost, I would say 95% of the cast and the crew would think the experience was extremely positive and that they were appreciated and that, they like coming back. That's, why the podcast has been so special because so many people talk about that they haven't had work experiences like that. And I think people would say the same thing about the two movies that I did, except for they weren't as successful as Entourage, but the experience of doing it hopefully was rewarding. And I like to think I had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I love that, Doug. And I just love everything that you're saying here today. This is so valuable for the audience. So many great, tangible techniques and lessons. I'll ask you something a little bit weird now. In terms of, instead of like advice for the audience, I'm going to ask you a quick piece of advice and suggestion you can give to me. So, as I was telling you before we went on air, I pivoted in the pandemic and basically left my businesses and went all in on my passion, which is the CLS brand, and basically helping people revamp their mindsets. Now we got the podcast going, which has had a ton of success. I'm working really hard, but there's something else I'd rather do. To the world, it looks like an overnight success, but like I told you earlier, they don't see the 20-hour days. What suggestion or advice could you give to me to keep doing what I'm doing, keep flying, and keep reaching more people to help more mindsets be revamped and just touch more lives?
Well, I mean, look, the social media world is, which, unfortunately, I started extremely late at it, and I realized how incredibly valuable it is for whatever you're doing. I see like, Jordan Belfort's I grew up with. He's a friend of mine. I know to some he's a controversial figure, but I see what he's done to rebrand himself, and I just think it's amazing. And he really is every day. Hopefully he's redeeming himself for what happened in the past, but he's also getting out there and letting people know that he's got a real skill and really has something to say. And I think why these podcasts are so great, whoever they are, because anyone could do it with a very limited thing. And then they can explain who they are, what their business is, no matter what it is, motivational speaking, sales, whatever it may be. I just think it's a great time to multitask and use this kind of medium that has just come to the forefront to help you get wherever you're going to go. The connections that you can make from it, I just think that's the way to be. I mean, look, you're doing it. Like the odds of us meeting 7 years ago are almost zero. So I think it's been pretty wild.
Yeah, I love that. And for my audience listening, we have almost 40,000 downloads already. Should you check out what Doug's got going on in regards to the new podcast? The answer is absolutely. In case you're not familiar with the show Entourage, which, unless you're living under a rock, one of the greatest shows of all time, so brilliantly written and just so fun and entertaining. He's got the podcast now. Where is it? Anywhere you listen to podcasts, Doug?
Yep, Victory the podcast, and we're gonna start hopefully soon. We just made a deal to start airing some videos of the podcast, but it's
Yes.
Kevin Dillon, who played Johnny Drama, and Kevin Connolly, who played Eric. And then we've had pretty much everybody else. Last week we had Dice, so everybody in New York, check that out. It's a great interview with him. Talks about the real ups and downs of, and you might be a little too young to remember when Dice was selling out arenas all over the country and was literally the biggest comedian on the planet Earth. And then, PC culture really turned on him and made a concerted effort to destroy his career. It's funny how now everyone thinks this is a new thing. It's not a new thing. This has been going on for a long time. And, so we do a lot of those types of interviews, which are fun.
Yeah, I was a little too young to see him, I guess, in his prime, but I'm a huge fan of his, just even playing catch up. And I especially respected the hell out of his role in The Star is Born. It was cool to see that other dynamic of him.
Yeah, I mean, and he also was in Blue Jasmine. Woody Allen did, and Scorsese did Vinyl. He did on TV. Dice, yeah, Dice has got a lot left.
I love that. Where can the audience find you? Where do you hang out the most? Instagram besides the podcast?
Yeah, I don't really hang out too much, but yeah, Instagram. I'm Mr. Doug Ellin on Instagram, and we've got a page, Victory the Podcast page on Twitter and Instagram. So please follow it, but more importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Check it out, give it a listen.
Yeah, I'm gonna tag you on both these on Instagram so my followers can find yours. Should you guys check out the podcast? Absolutely, you should. Doug, I just want to say you don't shy away from your struggles and your challenges as they've shaped you, and that's something I find very relatable and liberating. I want you to know that you're the definition of perseverance, grit, and heart from your life experience from New York to LA to creating one of the best shows, in my opinion, that planet Earth has ever seen, Entourage. And now, obviously, with the podcast and so forth, I could personally guarantee that your best is yet to come. You're someone I admire, appreciate, and respect very much. And I can absolutely promise you this is just the beginning of a special relationship. And this will not be the last time you and I collaborate. And I can't wait to watch you fly, my friend.
Thank you. Much appreciated. It be good.
Yeah. Have a good day, buddy. Speak soon.
Take care.